Welcome to Artificial Fictions. We post new scary stories every day written by artificial intelligence. I hope you enjoy them. In the heart of the city, there stood an old hospital that had been abandoned for years. Once a place of healing and hope, it now stood silent and empty, its hallways haunted by the echoes of the past. But as the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness descended upon the city, strange things began to happen within the abandoned hospital. One night, a young woman named Sarah found herself alone in the hospital, her footsteps echoing through the empty corridors as she searched for a place to shelter from the storm raging outside. As she wandered deeper into the hospital, she could feel a sense of unease settling over her like a heavy fog. The air was thick with the scent of disinfectant and decay, and strange shadows danced along the walls. Suddenly, Sarah heard a faint sound coming from one of the rooms, a soft, plaintive cry that sent shivers down her spine. With a sense of growing dread, Sarah approached the room and pushed open the door, her heart pounding in her chest. What she saw inside made her blood run cold, a figure lying on a gurney, its face hidden beneath a white sheet. With trembling hands, Sarah reached out and pulled back the sheet, revealing the face of a patient who had long since passed away. But as she turned to leave, Sarah heard the sound of footsteps echoing down the hallway, a sound that seemed to grow louder and closer with each passing moment. Panicked, Sarah ran for the exit, her footsteps echoing through the empty hospital as she fled into the night. But as she stumbled out of the hospital and into the cool night air, she couldn't shake the feeling that something dark and malevolent still lurked within the abandoned halls, a presence that would haunt her nightmares for years to come. High in the rugged peaks of the Himalayas, there was a seasoned mountain climber named Alex. He had spent years scaling the tallest peaks, always seeking new challenges and adventures. One fateful day, Alex set out to conquer a particularly treacherous mountain known as Everest's Revenge. It was said to be the most dangerous climb in the world, with its sheer cliffs and unpredictable weather. Undeterred by the warnings of his fellow climbers, Alex embarked on the ascent, determined to prove his skills and bravery. As he climbed higher and higher, the air grew thinner and colder, and the winds howled like vengeful spirits seeking to claim his soul. But Alex pressed on, driven by a single-minded determination to reach the summit and conquer the mountain once and for all. As he reached the final stretch of the climb, disaster struck. A sudden avalanche thundered down the mountainside, engulfing Alex in a torrent of snow and ice. Miraculously, Alex survived the avalanche, but he found himself stranded on a narrow ledge with no way to climb up or down. As night fell and the temperature plummeted, Alex huddled against the cold, his body racked with exhaustion and fear. But that was when he heard it, a low, guttural growling coming from the darkness below. With a sinking feeling in his stomach, Alex realized that he was not alone on the mountain. Something was lurking in the shadows, waiting for him to make a fatal mistake. With every fiber of his being, Alex fought to stay awake and alert, knowing that one wrong move could mean certain death. But as the hours passed and exhaustion overtook him, Alex felt his grip on reality slipping away, and as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, the rescue team arrived at the summit, only to find Alex's lifeless body dangling from the edge of the cliff, a grim reminder of the dangers that lurked within the unforgiving peaks of Everest's Revenge. In a small town nestled at the edge of a dark forest, there was a house that stood abandoned for decades. Locals whispered about the tragic events that had unfolded within its walls, a family torn apart by madness and despair. One night, a group of teenagers dared each other to spend the night in the abandoned house, eager to prove their bravery. Despite the warnings, they ventured inside, their flashlights casting eerie shadows on the walls. As they explored the dilapidated rooms, they could feel a sense of unease creeping over them like a cold hand squeezing their hearts. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and strange whispers seemed to echo through the empty halls. Suddenly, they stumbled upon a hidden staircase leading down into the darkness below. With a sense of trepidation, they descended into the depths of the house, their footsteps echoing on the old wooden steps. At the bottom of the staircase, they found themselves in a dark, musty cellar filled with cobwebs and dust. As they shone their flashlights around the room, they noticed strange symbols carved into the walls, a language long forgotten, filled with dark and ominous meanings. Just as they were about to leave, they heard a faint scratching sound coming from the shadows. Their hearts pounding, they turned to see a pair of glowing eyes staring back at them from the darkness. With a collective scream, they turned and ran for the exit, their footsteps echoing through the abandoned house as they fled into the night. But as they stumbled out of the house and into the cool night air, they knew that they had awakened something dark and malevolent within the abandoned house, a presence that would haunt their nightmares for years to come, waiting patiently for its next opportunity to claim its victims. In a small town nestled deep in the woods, there was an old rundown carnival that only appeared at night. Locals whispered about the carnival, saying that it was cursed and inhabited by spirits seeking revenge. One moonlit night, a group of friends decided to explore the carnival, drawn by its eerie allure and the promise of thrills and excitement. As they wandered through the deserted carnival grounds, they could feel a sense of unease settling over them like a heavy blanket. The air was thick with the scent of cotton candy and popcorn, but there was something else lurking beneath the surface, a darkness that seemed to seep into their bones. As they approached the dilapidated carousel, they heard a faint melody drifting through the air, a haunting tune that sent shivers down their spines. With a sense of trepidation, they climbed aboard the carousel, the creaking of the old wooden horses filling the silence of the night. But as the carousel began to spin, they realized with horror that they were not alone. The shadows around them began to twist and contort, taking on the forms of grotesque creatures with glowing eyes and razor-sharp teeth. With a collective scream, the friends tried to flee from the carousel, but it was too late. The creatures descended upon them, their claws tearing through flesh and bone as they dragged their victims into the darkness. And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, the carnival disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only a trail of blood and echoes of the screams that had filled the night air. To this day, the abandoned carnival remains a cursed and forbidden place, a reminder of the darkness that lurks just beyond the edge of reality, waiting to claim its next victims. As the sun sank below the horizon, the sky darkened and ominous clouds rolled in, signaling the approach of a powerful storm. Thunder rumbled in the distance and lightning streaked across the sky like fingers of fire. In a small, isolated farmhouse nestled in the countryside, a young couple named Jack and Emily huddled together, seeking refuge from the raging storm outside. The wind howled like a banshee, rattling the windows and shaking the very foundation of the old farmhouse. As they sat by the flickering light of a lantern, Jack and Emily could feel a sense of unease settling over them like a heavy cloak. The storm seemed to have a life of its own, an entity fueled by anger and rage. Suddenly there was a knock at the door, a sharp, urgent sound that cut through the roar of the wind. With trembling hands, Jack opened the door, revealing a figure standing on the doorstep, drenched to the bone and shivering with cold. The stranger's eyes gleamed with an otherworldly light as he stepped into the farmhouse, his presence filling the room with an icy chill. "I seek shelter from the storm," the stranger said in a voice that seemed to echo from the depths of the earth. With a sense of growing unease, Jack and Emily offered the stranger a seat by the fire, but they could not shake the feeling that there was something not quite right about him. As the storm raged on outside, the stranger began to speak in hushed tones, telling tales of ancient curses and vengeful spirits that lurked in the darkness. With each passing moment, Jack and Emily felt the grip of fear tightening around their hearts, as if they were being drawn into the stranger's twisted world of nightmares and shadows. And as the first light of dawn broke through the storm clouds, they realized with horror that the stranger was not what he seemed, a harbinger of darkness and despair, sent to torment them on this stormy night. With a scream, Jack and Emily fled from the farmhouse, their hearts pounding in their chests as they raced into the safety of the dawn. But as they looked back over their shoulders, they could still see the stranger standing in the doorway, his eyes glowing with an unholy light, a silent reminder of the horrors that lurked within the storm. In the heart of a dense forest, there was an old abandoned cabin hidden deep among the trees. Locals whispered about the cabin, saying that it was cursed and haunted by the spirits of those who had perished within its walls. One moonlit night, a group of friends decided to test their courage by spending the night in the abandoned cabin. Armed with flashlights and sleeping bags, they ventured into the forest, their laughter echoing through the trees. As they approached the cabin, they could feel a sense of unease settling over them like a heavy fog. The air was thick with the scent of pine and decay, and strange shadows danced along the walls of the cabin. Undeterred by the warnings of the locals, the friends pushed open the creaking door and stepped inside. The interior of the cabin was dark and musty, filled with the remnants of a life long forgotten. As they settled in for the night, they heard strange noises coming from the darkness outside, a soft scratching, the sound of footsteps echoing on the forest floor. With a sense of growing unease, the friends tried to dismiss the sounds as figments of their imagination. But as the night wore on, the noises grew louder and more insistent, as if something were trying to claw its way into the cabin. Suddenly, the door burst open with a deafening crash, and a cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing their flashlights and plunging them into darkness. With a collective scream, the friends huddled together in terror as they felt a presence moving through the darkness, a presence filled with malice and intent on claiming their souls. And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, the friends stumbled out of the cabin and into the safety of the daylight, their hearts pounding in their chests as they vowed never to return to the haunted cabin in the forest. In a sleepy coastal town, there was an old lighthouse perched atop a rocky cliff overlooking the stormy sea. Locals whispered about the lighthouse, saying that it was haunted by the ghost of its former keeper, a man who had perished in a tragic accident many years ago. One foggy night, a young couple named Ryan and Claire decided to visit the lighthouse, drawn by its eerie allure and the promise of adventure. As they approached the lighthouse, they could feel a sense of unease settling over them like a heavy mist. The air was thick with the scent of salt and seaweed, and strange shadows danced along the walls of the old building. Undeterred by the warnings of the locals, Ryan and Claire climbed the narrow staircase to the top of the lighthouse, their footsteps echoing through the empty tower. As they reached the lantern room at the top, they were greeted by a chilling sight, a figure standing at the edge of the cliff, its ghostly form illuminated by the flickering light of the beacon. With a sense of growing dread, Ryan and Claire approached the figure, their hearts pounding in their chests. But as they drew closer, they realized with horror that it was not a ghost at all, but a living person, a deranged hermit who had taken up residence in the abandoned lighthouse. With a maniacal laugh, the hermit lunged at them, his eyes filled with madness as he brandished a rusted knife. Ryan and Claire scrambled backwards, their screams echoing through the empty tower as they tried to escape. But the hermit was relentless, his laughter echoing through the night as he pursued them through the labyrinthine corridors of the lighthouse. With nowhere left to run, Ryan and Claire found themselves trapped at the top of the tower, the raging sea crashing against the rocks below. And as the hermit closed in on them, his knife gleaming in the darkness, Ryan and Claire knew that they were running out of time, trapped in the clutches of the haunted lighthouse, with no hope of escape. In the heart of a sprawling city, there was an old abandoned subway station that had long been forgotten by the world above. Locals whispered about the station, saying that it was cursed and haunted by the spirits of those who had perished in its dark tunnels. One night, a group of thrill-seekers decided to explore the abandoned subway station, eager to test their courage and uncover its secrets. Armed with flashlights and a sense of adventure, they descended into the depths of the station, their footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. As they ventured deeper into the tunnels, they could feel a sense of unease settling over them like a heavy shroud. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, and strange shadows danced along the walls. But the thrill-seekers pressed on, determined to uncover the truth behind the station's dark past. As they reached the heart of the station, they stumbled upon an old rusted train car sitting on the tracks. It was covered in graffiti, its windows shattered and its doors hanging open. With a sense of growing dread, the thrill-seekers climbed aboard the train car, their flashlights cutting through the darkness like beams of light. But as they explored the car, they heard a faint whispering coming from the shadows, a soft, plaintive sound that sent shivers down their spines. With trembling hands, they followed the sound to the rear of the car, where they found a figure huddled in the darkness, a ghostly apparition with hollow eyes and a mournful expression. With a collective scream, the thrill-seekers turned and fled from the train car, their hearts pounding in their chests as they raced through the dark tunnels of the subway station. But as they stumbled out of the station and into the safety of the night air, they knew that they had uncovered something far more terrifying than they had ever imagined. A presence that lurked in the shadows of the abandoned subway station, waiting patiently for its next victims. In a small town known for its fervent love of football, there was a legendary rivalry between two high school teams, the Wildcats and the Ravens. Every year, the town would come alive with excitement as the two teams faced off on the field, battling for victory and bragging rights. One fateful night, as the town gathered to watch the annual showdown between the Wildcats and the Ravens, a thick fog rolled in, casting an eerie pall over the stadium. As the game got underway, the tension between the rival teams was palpable, each side determined to emerge victorious. But as the fog grew thicker and the night grew darker, strange things began to happen on the field. Players reported seeing shadowy figures darting through the mist, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. With each passing moment, the sense of unease in the stadium grew, until it felt as though the very air was alive with malevolent energy. Suddenly, a player from the Wildcats collapsed on the field, his body racked with convulsions as if he were being tormented by unseen forces. Panic erupted in the stands as spectators scrambled to flee the stadium, but the exits were blocked by an impenetrable wall of fog. As chaos descended upon the field, the players from both teams found themselves locked in a desperate struggle for survival, battling against an unknown enemy that lurked within the mist. With each passing moment, the fog grew thicker and the shadows grew darker, until it seemed as though the entire stadium was engulfed in a nightmarish haze. And as the last echoes of the game faded into the night, the town was left to grapple with the horrifying truth that something evil had been unleashed upon their beloved football field, and that the darkness that lurked within the fog would haunt their nightmares for years to come. In a quiet suburb, there was a house that stood abandoned for years. Locals whispered about the family that had once lived there, a family torn apart by tragedy and madness. One night, a group of teenagers dared each other to spend the night in the abandoned house, eager to prove their bravery. As they stepped through the creaking front door, they could feel a sense of unease settling over them like a heavy blanket. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and strange shadows seemed to dance along the walls. Undeterred by the eerie atmosphere, the teenagers explored the house, their footsteps echoing through the empty rooms. But as the night wore on, strange things began to happen. Doors slammed shut on their own, and objects moved as if guided by an unseen hand. With each passing moment, the sense of unease grew, until it felt as though the very walls of the house were closing in around them. Suddenly, they heard a faint whispering coming from the darkness, a soft, insistent voice that seemed to be calling out to them from beyond the grave. With a sense of growing dread, the teenagers followed the sound to the basement, where they found a hidden door concealed behind a wall of cobwebs. With trembling hands, they pushed open the door and descended into the darkness below. But as they reached the bottom of the stairs, they realized with horror that they were not alone. Standing before them was the ghost of the family that had once lived in the house, their eyes filled with an otherworldly light. With a collective scream, the teenagers turned and fled from the basement, their hearts pounding in their chests as they raced through the empty rooms of the house. But no matter how fast they ran, they could still hear the echoes of the ghostly whispers and the chilling laughter of the spirits that haunted the abandoned house, a reminder of the darkness that lurked within its walls, waiting to claim its next victims. In the heart of a dense forest, there was an old, abandoned cabin hidden deep among the trees. Locals whispered about the cabin, saying that it was cursed and haunted by the spirits of those who had perished within its walls. One moonlit night, a group of friends decided to test their courage by spending the night in the abandoned cabin. Armed with flashlights and sleeping bags, they ventured into the forest, their laughter echoing through the trees. As they approached the cabin, they could feel a sense of unease settling over them like a heavy fog. The air was thick with the scent of pine and decay, and strange shadows danced along the walls of the old building. Undeterred by the warnings of the locals, the friends pushed open the creaking door and stepped inside. The interior of the cabin was dark and musty, filled with the remnants of a life long forgotten. As they settled in for the night, they heard strange noises coming from the darkness outside. A soft scratching, the sound of footsteps echoing on the forest floor. With a sense of growing unease, the friends tried to dismiss the sounds as figments of their imagination. But as the night wore on, the noises grew louder and more insistent, as if something were trying to claw its way into the cabin. Suddenly, the door burst open with a deafening crash, and a cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing their flashlights and plunging them into darkness. With a collective scream, the friends huddled together in terror as they felt a presence moving through the darkness. A presence filled with malice and intent on claiming their souls. And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, the friends stumbled out of the cabin and into the safety of the night air, their hearts pounding in their chests as they vowed never to return to the haunted cabin in the forest.